It's December 8th of 2011, and the NBA lockout shortened season is just days away from beginning. The Mavericks are preparing their title defense. The Miami Heat are ready for revenge after a disappointing defeat in the previous finals, and the Lakers are looking to make any last-minute adjustments to propel themselves back into title contention. It was just then that the Lakers sent shockwaves throughout the entire basketball universe when they made a blockbuster trade like they've pulled off so many times before in the franchise's rich history. A 26-year-old Chris Paul was acquired and set to join a still lethal 33-year-old Kobe Bryant, making them instantly one of the best backcourts in NBA history. Displayed on the screen are the players who were involved in the blockbuster three-team deal. One of the key and interesting aspects is how the Lakers' young and talented center Andrew Bynum was not included in the deal, and you guys may remember how he was eventually traded in the following offseason for Dwight Howard. This trade was foreseen and highly speculated over even when the Lakers acquired Paul, so many saw it as just a matter of time before a big three of Kobe, CP3, and Howard all assembled in Los Angeles. We had about an hour to enjoy the Paul trade and everything being right in the LA basketball world, when something happened that was even more shocking than the trade itself. The NBA league office stopped the deal. It was stunning. I had never seen such a thing, and it felt like a dramatic abuse of power. I was waiting for someone in the Lakers organization to try to take the league to court. I just couldn't understand how they could get away with this. In order to understand the league's decision, you have to understand what the climate of the NBA was in December of 2011. For months, small market NBA owners and general managers had been complaining about the difficulties of competing with larger markets. Player movement was at an all-time high, and the smaller franchises were finding it more and more difficult to retain their superstar players in free agency. On top of all of that, the league was only 1 year removed from the Big Three assembling on the Miami Heat, where LeBron predicted at least 8 championships. Throughout the NBA's history, we had seen plenty of different super teams, but still, the Miami situation was different. Never before had there been 3 top 10 players in the prime of their careers all signing on the same team in the same offseason. For owners and general managers, it felt like it set a jarring new course for the future of the league. So it's easy to understand why people in power were in a sensitive place in 2011. Immediately after the Chris Paul trade went down, League Commissioner David Stern was bombarded with complaints from other team owners around the league, as they were furious that the Lakers appeared to be assembling another super team, and were begging Stern to block the trade. The owners most notably complaining to Stern were Cavaliers owner Dan Gilbert, who had just lost LeBron to the Heat, and Mavericks owner Mark Cuban. Now, the crucial and often overlooked detail in this drama was the fact that the New Orleans Hornets were the only team in the NBA that were actually owned by the NBA itself, meaning they did have executive power to cancel or finalize trades for New Orleans. But up to that point, they almost never stepped in, and instead let the Hornets general manager Dell Demps handle all of the basketball decisions. But just because you have the power to make an executive order doesn't mean you should. It's worth mentioning that this was a very unique situation that doesn't currently exist in today's NBA. So although Dell Demps made the deal with the Lakers in this instance, after hearing the complaints of several league owners, David Stern blocked the trade. There would be no renegotiating and no adjustments necessary. The league was simply not going to let Chris Paul go to the Lakers. The craziest part was the political slap-to-the-face lie that the league gave us, making a statement that the trade was nixed for, quote, basketball reasons. No, it was clearly not for basketball reasons, which is exactly why they couldn't explain what those reasons were. If it was for basketball reasons, then they would have let Dell Demps keep his power, since he clearly had the best interest of his team in mind. But they didn't do that. Instead, they undermined Dell Demps by overriding his trade where he wanted to make the best move for New Orleans. Why is he even the general manager if he ultimately doesn't have control of basketball decisions within the organization? It was a move that simply protected the league office from the wrath of the team owners around the league, who were essentially just envious of the Lakers' ability to bring in talent. Can you sense my bitterness yet? I hope so, because as a Laker fan, and more importantly as a basketball fan in general, I will never, ever get over this. And here's why. The decision to not allow Paul to go to the Lakers and instead being dealt to the Clippers had a massive ripple effect on the league as a whole in many ways that were negative. First off, let's delve into how it affected the Lakers. As many of you know, players can take it really personally when their names are publicly involved in trade discussions. But it's something else entirely to hear that you are in fact being traded, just to then awkwardly rejoin the team because the league blocked the trade. Suddenly, the player feels betrayed and feels as if he isn't valued by the organization. These emotions didn't hit anyone harder than the Lakers' Lamar Odom, who tweeted shortly after the deal was blocked and said, "When a team trades you and it doesn't go down, now what?" Odom was apparently so hurt by the Lakers' attempts to trade him that reports began to surface that he had plans to skip the Lakers' training camp. The writing was on the wall. Because of the soured relationship between Odom and the Lakers, they had basically no other choice but to trade him to another team, which ended up being the Mavericks, where they essentially only got a draft pick in return, which was a huge blow to the depth of their team, which was looking to contend immediately. But that's just barely scratching the surface. The following season, the Lakers traded multiple picks for Steve Nash, who was quickly approaching 40 years old, was a defensive liability, and was extremely injury-prone. This was a regrettable decision. They don't trade for Steve Nash if they have a prime-age Chris Paul. If they have CP3 instead of Steve Nash, then they don't hire Mike D'Antoni because of the Nash and D'Antoni connection. This time, they get it right, and Phil Jackson, who was ready to take the job, is selected to be the head coach instead. If Kobe has CP3, Dwight Howard, and Phil Jackson, then they certainly don't struggle to make the playoffs. And if they don't struggle, then Kobe doesn't play an absurd amount of minutes desperately trying to make the playoffs that ends up with him tearing his Achilles. In the midst of Kobe's streak of crazy playing time, Ramona Shelburne wrote an article of the risk of wearing down Kobe to such an extent. And what do you know? A few games later, the Achilles popped. I like Dwight Howard on the Lakers a lot more if CP3 is his point guard to work with. Chris Paul has done an excellent job in years past of making centers like Tyson Chandler and DeAndre Jordan have some of their best years. Dwight Howard would have benefited from that connection as well. I also have much more confidence in Kobe and Dwight working together if Phil Jackson is there to manage the egos. So let's dive in more specifically to how this affected Kobe. If the Chris Paul trade goes through, then Kobe goes on to win his 6th ring just like MJ, and maybe that's even the way he retires. In all of my knowledge of basketball history, there's no player who I know as much about or whose mindset I understand as much as Kobe's. And Kobe was talking about possibly retiring in 2012. But he didn't retire in 2012, he retired much later in 2016. So why was that? Well, it's simple. Because he couldn't get 6. It was clear as a close viewer that Kobe's mission and purpose as a competitor was to win his 6th ring, equaling him to Michael Jordan. When Kobe won his 5th ring, he was quick to point out that he now had as many as Magic and one more than Shaq. Ring count was everything to him, and that pushed him to struggle through the final 4 years of his career. The last few seasons of Kobe were brutal to watch. The Achilles was what started his dramatic decline. He was hampered by numerous injuries as his body betrayed him, his efficiency had gone into the toilet, and his Lakers were consistently losing as he was surrounded by players much younger than him who didn't share his will and competitive drive to win at all cost. Something that's a fact but shouldn't be is that Kobe freaking Bryant was a part of the worst Lakers team in franchise history. Other than his farewell game where he scored 60, his final few seasons were a basketball nightmare. And sure, you could blame Lakers management, or even Kobe for taking a giant contract in his twilight years, but first and foremost, the majority of the blame traces back to the day the league told the Lakers you're not allowed to add talent, and it was all downhill from there. In his early years, Chris Paul was beginning to build a reputation for himself as one of the ultimate competitors. He was seen as a no-nonsense type of leader who loved to win and hated to lose. But is that how we view him in the modern day? Not quite, to be honest. Now he has the reputation of being a guy who struggles to get past the second round. His ability to perform well when it matters most is hotly debated, and some are crazy enough to even suggest that there's an argument on whether or not he should even be in the Hall of Fame. If Chris Paul had joined Kobe, then there's a good chance he becomes an NBA champion in his prime age, which totally transforms his legacy, and now with his career-long statistics, he comfortably enters the conversation of the greatest point guards of all time. He also would have been the man appointed to lead the NBA's most iconic franchise as Kobe was leaving the league behind. And as a member of Team Banana Boat, Chris Paul is likely waiting for LeBron with open arms whenever he was ready to join Los Angeles. If Chris Paul had joined the Lakers, they may have won a championship, but them even getting to the NBA Finals certainly wasn't a foregone conclusion. They would have had to get past a young Oklahoma City team in 2012, or they would have had to get past a strong San Antonio group the couple seasons after that. But regardless, if they could just pull it off any one of those seasons, then we would have witnessed what has become one of the greatest what-ifs in basketball history. The Miami Heat would have been waiting for the Lakers, and Kobe versus LeBron finally happens in the NBA Finals, and the outcome likely gives us a definitive answer on how we would rank the two players. It would have been one of the most watched, most hyped, and most significant finals we've ever seen between two legends who seemed destined to be rivals, but unfortunately just never were. So when people talk about the blocked Chris Paul trade, remember, it wasn't just us Laker fans who lost as a result. We all lost. Let me know in the comments section if you're still as pissed as I am. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.